Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Monday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 28th of July. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your very latest weather information from the National Weather Service around Alaska. You can do that easily by going online to weather.gov/Alaska, or you can use your NOAA Weather Radio. The weather info line's open at 800-472-0391. Find us on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube. During the afternoon, you get your daily afternoon map briefing there. You can find that on YouTube about 3:45 to around 4 o'clock or so. And you can find us on Facebook there. And if you've looked at that recently, you would have had a heads up that some heavy rain was moving through South Central. There's more rain on the way for more parts of Alaska this week. We'll talk about where here in just a few minutes. The first thing to point out, though, that as we've been talking about for the last few days, fire danger is waning and just about gone. Well, now it's down to low to moderate, so we are no longer plotting any high or extreme areas of fire danger at this point across Alaska. So give yourself a little clap there, and good news, hopefully that will stick around through the rest of the summer. Now looking out to the west, we can see the current weather pattern is the same as the weather pattern really was yesterday and the day before that and the day before that. That will likely continue to be the case as high pressure is blocking the weather pattern in the upper levels of the atmosphere and at the surface. Pretty decent ridge sitting right here across the southern Bering Sea. Underneath that, a wealth of stratus and fog for many of you in the Bering and along the Aleutians and the west coast. You know that all too well. And you can see the active weather coming off of eastern Asia and running into that and then having to take a pretty hard jog to the north and going up and over that ridge and then coming down on the west side of Alaska or perhaps running through the interior. That's what's going on right now. Another wave of moisture has worked itself from the Chukchi Sea all the way through the Yukon Valley and now is working its way into south and central Alaska with a pretty decent dose of rainfall. It's a pretty quick mover. In fact, if you look carefully here, you can see some of the clouds dropping from northwest to south and east. And as that swings through here, the rain will continue through the evening hours and then likely be out of here by early tomorrow morning. For southeast, the steadier rainfall is brought to you by a frontal boundary draped right over southeastern Alaska. To the west and to the south, it's a pretty ragged system, but the flow is continuing along that boundary and in just the right places to keep rainfall going for many locations up and down the southeastern panhandle at this hour. Out across the Yukon, we're always looking upstream to see what might be working its way into the interior, and this speckledy kind of rough texture here in the satellite picture indicates a lot of upward moving air. That's convection or towering cumulus clouds, and in many cases thunderstorm clouds once again. Some of this is drifting to the west, and we've seen some isolated activity work its way into the Copper River Basin in areas between Northway and Eagle and the 40-mile country. I don't think it's made it quite to Fairbanks yet, but something to keep an eye on. This is moving from northwest to south and east. This air is moving from east to west, and you've got wetter air moving in from southeast to north and west. Behind that, we have high pressure sitting across the southern Bering, and that is just pushing down in the atmosphere. It's not upward building air, it's sinking air, but it's very stable air. So any moisture next to the ocean surface that's trapped there isn't going anywhere. It's certainly not evaporating. So we have a lot of ship tracks that are easy to be seen around St. Matthew Island waters. You can see the clouds actually being carved out as the air moves over that, and you can see some of the ship tracks, much like contrails are in the atmosphere. The trails from the ship's exhaust are also visible in the visible satellite picture at times. And good news, if you're looking for more sunshine across northwestern Alaska, the Arctic coast, and certainly the west coast and the delta regions of Alaska, sunshine is coming your way in the next couple days. Let's get the map started here with low pressure working across the Alaska range. You can see rain on either side, some of that pretty heavy. Earlier this afternoon, that is dropping southward fairly quickly. Here's our low pressure system across the eastern Gulf, and spotty showers, I'd say isolated right now across the eastern part of the interior. High pressure up north and high pressure across the Bering. By tonight, Rainfall is dropping southward fairly quickly. That circulation along the frontal boundary will probably fall apart. If it's still with us, it'll be located just south of the Kenai Peninsula, I would think, by overnight and early morning tomorrow. A trough of low pressure across the mountains and across southeastern Alaska. The front that there now is really not much to write home about. And out across the western Bering, you can see some light rain and showers there with a 1,026 millibar high north of the eastern chain. Fog all along that, and a high pressure system across the Chukchi Seacoast, also producing fog along the Beaufort Seacoast. Things are drying out tonight already along the Yukon border. By tomorrow afternoon, scattered clouds perhaps along the valley. If that, the bulk of the cloud cover and the bulk of precipitation will be well south of the Alaska Range at this point. A better chance for rainfall across the Copper River Basin, as you saw to your west today. That will be over your area tomorrow. And for southeast, steadier rainfall still a possibility in your forecast. Kodiak looking at some showers, but possibly a thunderstorm or two around the Kenai Mountains into the Chugach and also across the eastern parts of the Alaska Range and the upper Tanana Valley. To the west of that, though, much drier conditions as high pressure has dropped in a pretty decent load of dry air to the west coast. 1,027 millibar high across the Bering Strait and just south. And then more rain trying to work its way up from the south thanks to the return flow on the western side of that high pressure ridge. Across the Arctic coast, high pressure is moving eastward ever so slightly. That puts it more in the Beaufort Sea area at 1,031 millibars. That'll keep a light easterly wind moving along the coast, but it will likely also trap areas of fog and mist across the coastal areas. And across Nunivak Island, 1,026 millibar high there just to your north and west. That makes that return flow a little bit more likely for the central and western part of the chain. Light rain there with low pressure out across the Aleutians to the west and low pressure across the Gulf of Alaska. Also keeping some areas of light rain and showers mainly out over open water, and any rain that's falling still across southeastern Alaska, the Copper River Basin, Prince William Sound, even the eastern part of the Kenai Peninsula will likely be a lot more showery in nature than the steadier rainfall that you've been dealing with for perhaps at this point 24 to 48 hours and considerably longer there if you're in southeastern Alaska. One thing to note, look at the wealth of dry air now working across the Alaska Peninsula, the eastern chain, and most of the Yukon Valley, and certainly up north. Much drier air working into the north and west than what we've seen for many days. Here's a look at temperatures now for the mid to upper 50s for southeastern Alaska today. Not a bad day considering the clouds and the rainfall in the region. 57 in Juneau, 59 at Sitka. Look like upper 50s to about 60 degrees for Annette and Ketchikan. Haida Gwaii area also about the same, 64 in Hyder. Around Prince William Sound, mid to, well, let's say lower to mid 60s, including Cordova at 64, Valdez 61, about the same in Seward. 58 in Kenai, 63 for Anchorage, and the same there in Homer as well. Kodiak 61 and lower 60s around the Tanana Valley, including Fairbanks today. Healy was showing 50 degrees, a little more rainfall up that way. 61 in Eagle, 63 in Northway. For Yukon had 55 at the 3 o'clock hour, 59 in Arctic Village, 30s and 40s for the Arctic coast. Wainwright was looking fairly mild at 50 this afternoon, with Kaktovik 10 degrees cooler, and 35 in Barrow. Meanwhile, Kotzebue Sound saw temps in the 50s and lower 60s there around Kivalina, 59 in Nome, 54 just south of Unalakleet, and 52 around Hooper Bay, with Bethel showing 53. As you get out towards Spiravan, temperatures around Sleepmute as well in the 40s and 50s, 52 in McGrath. Galena was 53 degrees, and southward you can see temps in the Bristol Bay region anywhere from 55 in King Salmon to 68 in Dillingham. A little bit of sunshine makes a huge difference. And around the Pribilofs, also looking at a little bit of a difference between sun and clouds and fog. 56 around the 3 o'clock hour in St. Paul, with 50s and 60s for the Alaska Peninsula, 61 in Sandpoint. Cold Bay and False Pass also in the mid-50s this afternoon, with 51 in Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, and low 50s for Attu, Adak, and Atka there. Here's a look at overnight lows then. Some of the warm spots will be across the southwestern coast, and looks like the Delta region around Bethel could be some of the warmer places. There are 52 degrees there, also around King Salmon and Dillingham. The Alaska Peninsula fairly mild tonight, lows near 50 in the Aleutians. The interior should see temperatures in the lower to mid 40s, by and large 47 in Fairbanks, 46 in Fort Yukon. And out around Galena, probably 43. South Central will stay mild tonight with the wetter air in place. Lower 50s expected there, all the way down the Cook Inlet toward Kodiak at 53. Prince William Sound in the lower 50s, with southeast in the lower to mid 50s. Juneau about 52. Looks like Annette, Ketchikan, Hyder, even Metlakatla probably talking about temps in the mid 50s. The Arctic coast could be a chilly one. Looks for lows below freezing from Barrow to points east around Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse, but then mild still around Kotzebue Sound and areas near Nome about 43. High temps there tomorrow with more sunshine. You would expect temperatures to go up, and they do quickly. Look at that. It's mid to upper 60s, lower 70s across the middle and even upper Yukon Valley. Southwest, you're looking at temperatures closer to 70 degrees, 57 closer to the coast like Nunivak Island, St. Lawrence Island 51. The Pribilof still holding closer to 50 degrees, mid to upper 50s for the Alaska Peninsula and the chain. Southeast, expect temperatures to climb just a little bit, upper 50s and lower 60s. South Central, mid to upper 60s, probably some areas a little bit further out into the hills in the lower 70s. Kodiak Island at 58. Here's a look at flying weather now. Wide swath of MVFR conditions for southeast and the eastern Gulf, wrapping into about Prince William Sound. The interior and most of the mainland looking at VFR. And we'll be watching for more of a widely scattered storm situation across the eastern sections of the Alaska Range, the eastern interior, the upper Yukon Valley, maybe even the Kenai Mountains. But besides that, things look pretty good as far as flying weather goes. IFR conditions for the coastal plain and most of the Beaufort Seacoast, including areas around Barrow, and for pretty much the majority of the Bering Sea, including the St. Matthew Island waters and the Pribilofs, looking at IFR conditions for the central and western chain as well. MVFR just creeping in a little bit into Bristol Bay. Past conditions then look like this. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass both expect to be VFR conditions for your Tuesday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect to see improvements during the day, eventually heading up into VFR conditions there. As you go up the Horn around Rainy Pass, MVFR toward VFR conditions for your Tuesday. Windy Pass looks to be visual flight rule through most of your Tuesday. Isabel Pass will be watching for some convection. Otherwise, VFR conditions prevail there, and for Mentasta Pass, similar story. Tanita Pass, expect that to be VFR conditions through most of Tuesday. Portage Pass looks to be smooth and clear sailing at this point. And Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect that to maintain MVFR conditions through most of the day. Freezing levels show the colder air is retreating somewhat, but you can see the effects of the ridge of high pressure pushing that warm air all the way up into the Bering Strait. Now, the ice is melting across the Chukchi Seacoast while it continues to kind of mash in north and east of Barrow at this point. For southeast, freezing levels around 8 to 10,000 feet. While that warmer air is moving north, the colder air continues to try and work its way south. Icing potential generally high up there, above 10 to about 16,000 feet across some pockets of southeastern Alaska. These areas will be moving from southeast to north and west, so expect this to not really maintain one specific location throughout the day. Same goes for the central and western Bering Sea. You'll have to climb above 12,000 feet to find any light to isolated moderate icing potential. Most of the air is fairly warm in both of these locations and drying out across the interior. The jet stream shows our weather pattern is pretty much stagnant at this point. That really kind of upside down omega shape is exactly what we call this. This is an omega blocking pattern, and that upside down Greek letter kind of familiarity here tells us that low pressure is locked in place across the Gulf. We have a high pressure ridge that can't move or isn't strong enough to move yet, and low pressure out across the Kamchatka Peninsula. Well, this pattern is pretty much locked in place with its neighbors. You've got low pressure, low pressure, and another high out across the east. So nothing is really moving from one direction to the other, so the weather we have is the weather we'll get probably for the next several days. This system can strengthen or weaken, and once it weakens, we might see other storms work into the mix a little bit. But for right now, we have a pretty unstable pattern sitting right over the mainland of Alaska and the Gulf of Alaska, with wetter weather moving into southeast and much warmer weather sitting across the Bering Sea and working that into the Chukchi Sea for that. And then any storms right now are being shunted well to the south with any majority of the Pacific moisture. At 9,000 feet, we have low pressure across the Gulf. Wind speeds between 15 and 30 knots, more of a northerly wind coming through the YK Delta and across Nunivak Island, around 10 to 30 knots as well. More of a south and southwesterly flow for the central and western chain, 20 to 30 knots there. And southerlies continue for southeast, 15 to 25 knots, with that northwesterly flow working through the Beaufort Seacoast, about 15 to 30 knots. A very similar pattern here at 3,000 feet. You can see the ridge of high pressure a little bit stronger perhaps at 3,000 feet. That's sitting in the same place as we saw it on the surface map. Right around St. Lawrence Island into the Bering Strait, and it's guiding some stronger winds in from the north and west to places like Point Lay and Point Hope, and right over the easternmost parts of Kotzebue Sound. Again, 5, 10, even 25 knots at most. But then the winds really slow down as they pass over Hooper Bay and into unalaska and Dutch Harbor's waters. Low pressure across the Gulf of Alaska is creating more of a north and easterly wind running parallel to Cook Inlet and Kodiak Island, and light easterly winds are expected along the northern parts of the Gulf Coast and through Prince William Sound, with light southerlies continuing for southeast. Turbulence-wise then, probably below 6,000 feet for parts of coastal and southern sections of southeastern Alaska. Some isolated chop around Bristol Bay coming off the Kilbucks and southward into the Alaska Peninsula and around Sand Point. Also across the western chain below 6,000 feet, and to expect a little bit of chop mainly in the eastern Beaufort Seacoast below 5,000 feet. That's a look at your aviation forecast. As we're getting closer and closer to the sea ice minimum, we'll continue to provide you with daily updates there. Stay tuned for that and a look at your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health here in Anchorage. This evening, we are honored to have back on our show Cricket Renner. He is the wing leader for the Alaska wing of the Commemorative Air Force, or CAF. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks, good to be here.
The Commemorative Air Force is a national nonprofit organization that preserves and shows historical aircraft. How does this organization fit in with the national organization?
Well, the National CAF is one of the world's largest air forces, 150 aircraft divided amongst all 50 states, a whole bunch of different units, and our unit is just one of those of the whole national organization.
And you fly aircraft that are based here in Alaska?
We do. We have, for the Commemorative Air Force ourselves, we have a BT-13, which was a pilot training airplane in World War II, as well as a Harvard, which is a Canadian-built version of a T-6 Texan. Associated with our group right next to us is the Wings of Freedom Museum, and that has two AT-6 Texans as well.
And they're all restored to flying condition?
They are.
And
they are flying. Flew several just the other day.
Oh, great. Do any of them have a history in Alaska?
None of those aircraft that we have here have Alaska-specific history. There were T-6s up here during the war that were used sort of as a liaison airplane for people to fly from one location to the other, but not used in combat. But we also have another airplane that is just in the process of leaving, associated with our group, that does have some unique Alaska history, and that's the Zero.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it is.
You mentioned that you'd just been flying the other day.
I did, yeah.
Are you checked out in all of these aircraft?
I am. I fly them all.
And this might not be a fair question, but can you tell me which one is the most fun to fly?
Well, most pilots will say whatever the one you're currently flying is the most fun, right? But unfortunately, the one that's leaving, the Zero, is probably the most fun to fly because it's a lot of power, very lightweight. Flying it, I very much felt like the guys in World War II, what it would have felt like to have been a fighter pilot in World War II. Has been a fighter pilot myself. I sort of, prior generations see what they went through. The T-6 is also a great airplane just to fly because you see what every pilot who was in the Army Air Forces in World War II, that's why they flew in pilot training. So, thousands of our pilots flew that exact same airplane.
So I'm assuming you didn't go through pilot training to fly one of these aircraft. How did you learn?
Well, you get the tailwheel experience, and then we have several instructors here locally that check people out. And so the T-6 is a good training platform. It took, I'm amongst our group one of the, by far the lowest tailwheel pilots hours, and it took me about 2 to 3 flights to get checked out and signed off to go be able to fly it by myself now.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been flying for about 7 years now.
Okay. And I guess that's a credit to you and the aircraft, both.
Yeah, mostly the aircraft.
So, is it possible for members of the public to view these airplanes?
Absolutely. We're located, our little Air Force is located in the hangar.net, which is right there on 5th Avenue across the street from the Taco Bell and the Wendy's. It's open most every day. So people can come in and just talk to the folks that are there. We're always happy to have enthusiasts come by, look at the airplanes, as well as every Thursday night at 6 p.m. We have a meeting there, so people are welcome to come to those, check out our group, see what we're all about. As well as you can also dial our phone number, 907-646-4000, and that you can contact us there to find out about our group, or we also sell rides in the aircraft, and you can inquire about that as well.
Oh, really? Are rides available in all of the aircraft?
The rides are available in the BT-13.
Okay.
We sell a half hour for the BT-13 for $350, and a half hour in the AT-6s for $450. Unfortunately, like I said, the Zero's leaving anyway, but it's a single-seat airplane, so you couldn't sell rides in that.
And will the Zero be back?
We hope so. It's going to go to Japan for a static display over there, and then it'll come back after about a year. We don't know if it'll come here or not, but we hope so. If not, it'll let us move on to our next project, which we hope is something else with Alaska history, something maybe like a P-40 or a P-51.
This may be an unfair question too, but do you have your sights on anything?
Yep, like I said, just mentioned the P-40 would be a great airplane because it had combat history in Alaska. A fighter that you could modify to have a second seat in it, so we could sell rides in that and people could experience what a fighter in Alaska was like, or maybe a Mustang because it's sort of the iconic World War II fighter.
Sure.
Although Mustangs didn't fly in Alaska in the war, but that would still be a good airplane that sort of every fighter pilot's dream to fly.
So buying a ride in one of these aircraft is a great way to support
Absolutely.
their upkeep.
It absolutely is. It goes to our group to keep the airplanes flying between the maintenance, the fuel, the oil, every year we have to do an annual on them. As airplanes get older, they need more love and care. The hangarage is expensive as well. All the money donated or bought on the rides helps keep the airplanes going.
Are there other ways that people who might not have that kind of disposable income could use to support?
Absolutely. We're always looking for volunteers because people come out. So when we go to events, volunteers to help man the booths at events. We were telling other people about what we do, about why we're enthusiastic about what we do. So we're always looking for more volunteers to come out and help as well.
Okay, great. Sounds like there's a lot of opportunities for people that want to get involved.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Cricket. It's really been a pleasure having you here.
Yeah, thanks, Mary.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you are looking for a great opportunity to see some history and some really cool airplanes, we encourage you to visit the Alaska Flying Museum. It's a perfect place to spend a rainy Thursday or a rainy day and show your family or maybe some out-of-town visitors what airplanes in Alaska really look like. Wait until the winds are calm and the ceilings are high before you take them out flying, but spend some time at the museum. Until next time, fly safely.
Thanks so much. Here's a look at today's Sea Ice Edge. Once again, you can always track the progress of this as well as get the weekly sea ice outlook by going to weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. The edges of this are much smaller and lower in concentration. We do have a kind of a more thicker patch of ice just north and east of Barrow that's moving slowly westward. The ice to the west of Barrow is melting, and again, we've got some opening in the waters here. No shore-fast ice at this point. But you're going to need a pretty strong boat to get from west to east or east to west for right now. But things are changing and we'll continue to head toward the sea ice minimum here during the next several weeks. The sea forecast now for southeastern Alaska, winds up to 20 knots across the Lynn Canal as we go through Tuesday afternoon. 2 to 4 feet again as winds increase in the Lynn Canal area. Around Frederick Sound and Stevens Passage, more of a southerly wind. Some areas may see more of a southeasterly drift the farther north you go, but around Stevens Passage area, look for about 20 knots with a 4-foot sea southeasterlies in the Clarence Strait with 4-foot seas there. South and southeasterly winds coming up the coast with seas between 3 and 4 feet in the south and between 4 and maybe almost 5 feet as you head up toward Yakutat on Tuesday. Winds become more southeasterly outside of the northern entrances into toward Icy Cape and Cape Fairweather. 4-foot seas expected there. Winds almost go light, if not calm, south and west of Craig as we head into Wednesday afternoon. Southeasterlies diminish a little bit across the central inner waterways down to 10 knots with 2-foot seas there, and a southerly flow also diminishing across the Lynn Canal 15 feet with a 3-foot sea on Wednesday. For south central now, more of a northerly flow coming down Cook Inlet toward the Shelikof Strait region, 10 to 20 knots with 3, 4, even 5-foot seas expected there by the end of the afternoon. A variable and light flow inside of Prince William Sound, the north and western coast with northeasterlies on the eastern side of the Barrens and also on the east side of Kodiak Island, 20 knots with a 4-foot sea. As we get into Wednesday, look at kind of the mashup of wind directions here. Lots going on as low pressure is trying to get itself out of the way and the dry air is still sliding southward. So we're going to have a little bit of a variable wind across the region, but by the end of the day, we expect northeasterlies in the northern part of the Cook Inlet, westerlies coming into the western part of the Kenai Peninsula, and then southwesterly winds west of the Barrens with an easterly opposing flow on the other side of the islands. Light easterly winds there across the north and western part of the Gulf, and still holding on to a light and variable flow inside of Prince William Sound with a 4-foot sea. Also looking for light and variable winds east of Kodiak Island and in Shelikof Strait. Tuesday, more of a northerly flow around the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay. Northwesterlies coming into the north side there, and then higher gusts still south and west of Kodiak Island running down the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula at 20 knots with 4-foot seas. Those gusts could be upwards of 35 knots. A southerly flow inside of Bristol Bay on Wednesday, improving conditions on the Pacific side with 15 knots and 3-foot seas, and northerlies about 10 to 15 knots north of Cold Bay with a 4-foot sea on Wednesday. Across the Aleutians, most areas will be under a southeasterly flow, 20 to 25 knots, looking for 4 to 6, even 8-foot seas across the central part of the chain, 9 to 10-foot seas across the western chain, and north and northwesterly winds coming across the eastern part of the Aleutians at 15 to 25 knots and 3 to 5-foot seas there for Nikolsky and Unalaska on the north and south side, respectively. For Wednesday, southeasterlies continue, still about the same speed, 20 to 25 knots, with 5, 6, even 7 and 8-foot seas, 9-foot seas actually, if you get out toward Attu. More of a northeasterly wind on the Bering side of Unalaska and Nikolsky, and you're still looking at a northwesterly wind on the south side there in the Pacific. Look for 4-foot seas in those areas. For the west coast, north and easterly winds coming down the west coast and the Delta area. Look for winds about 15 to 20 knots or so, 3 to 5-foot seas expected from areas south of St. Lawrence Island into the Kuskokwim Delta. A variable flow around the Pribilofs with a 3-foot sea, 5-foot seas around the St. Matthew Island waters. By Wednesday, we would expect to see more of a southeasterly flow there. Southwesterlies around the St. Lawrence Island area, still looking at 3-foot seas, and northerlies continue around the Delta, 20 knots with a 5-foot sea, and variable and light winds around the Pribilofs with 3-foot seas through Wednesday. Northerly winds continue north of Barrow with westerlies around the Beaufort Seacoast. Offshore winds from Wainwright to Point Hope at 15 knots and northerlies inside of Kotzebue Sound. By Wednesday, look for a stronger south and easterly flow for the Chukchi Seacoast. Easterlies north of Prudhoe Bay, southeasterlies for Barrow, and northwesterlies still light around Kaktovik with a 2-foot sea there. All of that moving the ice around even more. Tonight's forecast shows rain still moving through south central and Kodiak. Look for southeasterly winds to keep some light rain across southeastern Alaska, with drier air dropping quickly into the middle Yukon Valley and across the Seward Peninsula. Showers expected across the Delta. By tomorrow afternoon, widely scattered showers and storms possible for the east. A few storms possible even in south central Alaska. Light rain continues for southeast, with drier weather still dropping more and more southward across all of the Yukon Valley now and into the Delta. Light rain across the western Bering and more sunshine in more places on Wednesday, with rainfall becoming more showery in nature for southeast and the Prince William Sound region. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.